Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Armenian Bar Association Young Lawyers Committee webinar series on emerging and developing areas of the law. This is our 8th in our series. And if you're interested, you can catch the prior versions on our YouTube page and also on our Facebook page. And if you want to join our committee or have any ideas for future panels or events, please feel free to reach out at info@armenianbar.org. Today's panel will be on developing trends in entertainment law. A few housekeeping matters before we get going. First, if you have any questions, please type them into the chat. I know there's a Q&A, but technical difficulties on my end, I won't be able to see those. So please put them in the chat and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can at the end of the panel. And then also, as a reminder, though, you can get 1 hour of CLE credit in California. Please just send us an email at info@armenianbar.org, and you should be able, we'll get you the form. And then finally, at the very end, we'll be sending out a link to a survey. We'd really appreciate if you could fill that out. Won't take too much of your time and helps us develop further programming and making sure this stuff is relevant to you. So without further ado, a bit about myself. My name is Vati Hindoyan, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Armenian Bar Association's Young Lawyers Committee. I also serve as Associate General Counsel at Meta, formerly known as Facebook. There I support marketing teams across the world working on consumer marketing initiatives and providing advice on advertising, intellectual property, and regulatory matters. And before that, I was actually in-house at Disney. So a lot of my former and current companies represented here. And I'm honored to introduce our panelists today. First up, my colleague, John Koshafian, who's also Associate General Counsel at Meta. He has worked in the entertainment industry for over a decade, getting his start at High Noon Entertainment, working on such notable shows as Fixer Upper, Cake Boss, and Tough Love. During his time at High Noon, John became the VP of Creative and Business Affairs, developing and pitching shows on one end and negotiating the deals on the other with over a dozen networks. In 2018, John moved over to Facebook Watch to work on establishing the emerging platform, working on such hits as Red Table Talk, The Birch, Post Malone Celebrity Beer Pong, Ball in the Family, Steve on Watch, and Simone versus Herself. John's current focus is expanding content across Meta, including Instagram and Messenger, and also playing a key role in introducing content into the metaverse. Ramela Ohanian is our other panelist. She's a senior associate at Sheppard Mullin's Entertainment, Technology, and Advertising Practice Group. She has been recognized by The Hollywood Reporter and Variety. Ramela represents companies, producers, studios, and networks on a variety of transactional matters related to digital media, television, both scripted and unscripted, short-form content, and feature films. Her 5-year practice at Sheppard Mullin focuses on the development and production of projects in the US and abroad, including the handling of talent agreements, major first look and overall agreements, and rights acquisitions. And last but not least, we have Talin Galoosian, who is Senior Counsel at Disney. She is Senior Counsel in the Labor Relations Group of Disney's General Entertainment Group. In that role, Talin advises production, finance, distribution, creative, and business and legal affairs colleagues on the application of collective bargaining agreements. She also assists in the negotiation of both single and multi-employer collective bargaining agreements. Talin has also served as counsel of SAG-AFTRA, the largest entertainment union in the world, and as an associate at a boutique employment litigation firm. Outside of her practice, Talin is on the board of Women Who Lead of the Association of Media and Entertainment Council, serves on the executive committee of LACPA's Entertainment Law and IP section, and is an adjunct professor. So we have some rock stars on our panel today. I'm really excited to have them on board. We wanted to first talk about the overview of entertainment law. Entertainment law is a giant category. It touches on a lot of areas of the law, and now that tech is encroaching in the space, it's spanning across industries too. So what is entertainment law? How do you define it? John, let's start with you.
Great, and thank you for having us on this incredible panel for an incredible bar association. So yeah, entertainment law is when you hear it, when you say it, it can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people at a lot of different phases of production. And so I figured you know, why not just go through the steps and the phases of different production and where entertainment law sort of intercedes throughout. So a quick rundown of what exactly entertainment law is, what we're going to be talking about today. And I'm sure, you know, you can move a lot of this in different little categories, but hopefully this is sort of a good generalization. So entertainment law is the legal management across the different phases of production. And usually the first phase of production is the selling phase. This is where you're putting a project together and where you'll see a lot of entertainment litigation about stolen ideas. And that was my IP, or you didn't have the rights to do this type of a project with that talent or that type of an IP. And so you'll see a lot of submission agreements where you're trying to submit an idea to an entity or organization. You'll see shopping agreements where you're trying to exclusively shop a certain project for a term of time. You'll see development deals and first looks. You'll see options of taking a book out or a video game out or some other IP out and developing a show around it. And then you sell a show, and once you sell a show, you'll enter into a production services agreement with a buyer, and that sets out the terms of services, the fees, the deliverables, the schedule, and what the creative framework is going to be. That then goes into the pre-production phase, which is probably for an entertainment transactional attorney where the bulk of the work is done. And this is where you're entering into the actual long-form talent agreements. You're entering into all the agreements with the producers, everybody that was involved in the sort of the development phase of a project. You're going through the chain of title. You're setting up insurance for the project. You're negotiating with the guilds and unions if there is some sort of jurisdiction that they're going to hold over. You're running background checks on those individuals that are going to be a featured player that you may want to know that there's a background check issue or whatnot. If you're working with minors, that means you're going to pull permits, you're going to hire studio teachers, you're going to put together this entire sort of minor labor relations framework into your production. Again, you're involved in all these little nitty-gritties in the pre-production. In some cases, you're going to license key IP during pre-production. So if you're doing a show that involves a sports league, you're going to put that into place prior to filming. You're going to review scripts, storyboards, animatics, episode treatments. Again, doing a lot of sort of the legal work up until rolling cameras. And then you roll cameras. And that typically is not a bulk of the work, but it's sort of day-to-day management. There's going to be more recently some COVID protocols and guidelines that an entertainment attorney is going to oversee to make sure that all the local, state, and federal guidance is being adhered to. You're clearing locations and guest releases. You're doing location agreements and guest talent releases as well. Sometimes there's an unexpected guild issue. You know, a production will flip, and that's when you go into a production thinking it's not going to be guild or union, and the crew or the cast have a mini uprising and say, no, this should be guild, and a production will film under guild jurisdiction, and so you got to quickly negotiate that and make sure everybody is happy. Sometimes there's further insurance discussions that you're involved with that your coverage won't cover. So if there's a dangerous shoot that you're going to be filming, sometimes you have to negotiate a separate insurance rider that your primary insurance won't cover. And then your shoot wraps, and then you move into post-production. And there's a lot of the content review, sort of the more fun stuff where you're like literally watching TV all day and making sure that there's nothing that's sort of sliding across the radar, things like defamation and trademark and copyright. Infringement. In some cases, you're doing additional clearance work, you're doing music licensing and other rights that you didn't pick up during the pre-production phase. You're putting all your marketing and promo materials together. You're making sure that talent is getting whatever talent approvals they have and sort of being sort of the hub of all that work and making sure that everybody is happy prior to actually putting this thing out. And then finally, you move into distribution. And typically, a network will be sort of one and done. You are going to sell it to that network. They're going to be the only distributor. But in some cases, there may be a secondary or syndication market where you're going to have to set up an additional agreement to go and sell this and shop this project around to other networks and organizations. And in some cases, there may be a reversion or a turnaround where the rights revert for your right as a network to distribute this content, and it reverts back to the producer or the IP holder. And so in all those phases and all those little tasks, the entertainment attorney is there to either negotiate or manage the risk of that particular phase of production. And so you can see that an entertainment attorney plays a pivotal role in managing all of that throughout the life cycle of a project. So that kind of captures everything an entertainment law and attorney hopefully does. And again, I'm sure there's a lot of moving parts there, and I'm sure our panelists have other thoughts as well.
I mean, I loved that breakdown. I feel like I want to print that and like hand that out to people. That was like an amazing breakdown. Yeah, I especially loved in the beginning how you said entertainment law could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I think that's so accurate. I feel like in the past, maybe when you hear entertainment law, you think of television and film. Or if you were an entertainment lawyer, you were like a boutique talent lawyer. Whereas now, entertainment law could encompass so many different things like gaming, short form content, esports. You know, I don't know that 10 years ago, people would say esports, it's entertainment law, but now absolutely today it is. So I love that breakdown. And I do feel like entertainment law has expanded a lot throughout the years. And now when people say it, it's not just TV and film, but it could be, you know, a laundry list of things that, you know, it encompasses.
So true. I don't know if Talin, you had anything else to add to that.
That was so great. I mean, that was fantastic. I don't have anything else to add, but except, you know, it's, you see this finished product, but there's so much that happened before it and will happen after it to make sure that finished product is, you know, as beautiful as it can be with no legal issues. So I think that was a great breakdown.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add is that the lawyer skills come in many different places, and there's so many folks that can plug in from like a labor perspective, an IP perspective, a privacy perspective, that, you know, sometimes you can be a lawyer in an entertainment space. So previously I was a lawyer at Disney in a very entertainment company in their consumer product side. So it was definitely post-production and had to do a lot of with their marketing of their product and whatnot. But you can find your door into the entertainment space in very interesting and niche, potentially avenues. There isn't one path to an entertainment lawyer and one path to like the type of law. So on that note, would love to ask all of our panelists what your typical day-to-day practice looks like. Ramela, why don't you take this one first?
Sure. So I think it's a really good question. And I think every day is different. I generally mean that. So one of the things I like working working at a firm is, and I think this actually also applies to in-house for sure, just in a different way. So at a firm, you have a variety of clients, if you're lucky, and they have they're structured differently. So I could have a client that's a studio. I could have a client that's a network. I could have a client that is an individual producer. So in my day-to-day, it's not that I work on like one client's project per day. It's like you do multiple things throughout the day. So I could start the day by helping my studio client, you know, attach talent to their movie, or help my individual producer try to get funding for his movie, or help my network client, you know, get the rights to a book to make a television series based on that book. So I think the day-to-day could definitely shift, and it ties back into what John was saying too, where you could be negotiating, or you could be drafting, or you could be doing all sorts of different things, types of negotiating on different types of projects. So every day could be a TV show, a movie, and like a book option rights, you know, which I love. And I think that also ties into your first question of entertainment law is so broad nowadays that on the same day I could be doing gaming, music, television, and film, as opposed to just film every day or TV every day. So I think it's really interesting. I've been a lawyer for like a little over 6 years now, and it still interests me every day because I feel like our day-to-day is so different. It's really cool.
How about you, John? What does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, so my day-to-day, my experience is primarily, almost exclusively in-house, and I think it's an important distinction to note that when you're working in-house, there are two sides to every sort of entertainment transaction, entertainment project, and that's the seller side and the buyer side. And usually, and I've been on both sides, and for a long period of time, and there's different roles that you would typically do on either side. And I would say on the seller side, when I was at a production company, you're much more proactive, and there you're actually hands-on negotiating, drafting, actually doing the red line drafts for the most part across all the different parties, whether it's talent, producers, appearance releases, all of that, good stuff. And now I'm on the buyer side as a network where a lot of my day-to-day is sort of managing what the producers and the production legal is doing. And so a lot of the time it's either having a call with them to, for them to sort of throw some things at me, like, what do you think about this? Are we able to do this? Can we get a concession here? Our agreement says we have to do X, Y, Z, but we're not able to deliver here. Can we get a waiver or the like? And having those discussions and sort of managing the project sort of more from a distance. And then the other half is more managing the clients internally, giving them a sense of what's happening on the ground from our producer partners, if there's additional risk that we need to discuss and what that entails. Sometimes there's some branding element that we'll need to escalate internally, if they want to use our brand or something of the like. And so I would say, my day-to-day, is not consistent, but it's more sort of a managerial role, certainly on the buyer side. But for those on the selling side, on the producer and the talent side, they know that there's a lot more of the drafting and the nitty-gritty that they have to do. So I've seen both worlds, and it really depends on what side of the table you're on.
And Talin, what about your day?
I think every day is so different. And I am in a unique spot with labor relations for Disney. So I assist with the studio side, but also ABC Network broadcast side. So one day it could be Channel 7 has a guild or union, something going on, and I'm going to be there to assist. Or, a show, I don't know, Grey's Anatomy, something's going on there. You want to make sure that you're assisting your clients, the production executives, and everybody to make sure they're doing everything right per the guild agreements, per the collective bargaining agreements, because those kind of lay the foundation out for, movies, films, a lot of things. But it's a lot of interaction with people. Our work is a lot of also negotiating with the guilds to get deals in place. Hopefully no arbitrations, but if we need to do it, we would do those. A lot of transactional things like that, a lot of communicating, a lot of just guiding productions along the merry path of labor and guild, any issues that may arise. So it's a lot of working with the labor code, especially California, here and there, New York, and also the National Labor Relations Board itself. And that's always interesting because the members of that board are elected by the president. So every term you kind of get a different vibe, and you might change things up depending on that. So every day is exciting. And I've also been here in practice for about 6 years too. And I can really say I love it. And it's just, it's cool to do something different every day. And I am still learning something new every day.
I think this is one of the industries, maybe I'm a little biased, but where someone can get their foot in the door, like in so many ways, and everyone can be working in the same entertainment space, but like have just a drastically different day depending on what piece of the puzzle happens to be their forte or what they're focused on that day or as the part of their career. But speaking of labor, kind of shifting gears a little bit, Talin, the labor legal department is probably the backbone and I suggest sometimes the bane of every major studios. Can you tell us about labor law generally and how it takes on a special flavor in the entertainment context?
Of course. So with labor law, you're looking at different than employment law. You're looking at the labor codes. You're making sure that you are following for example, labor law itself, but also any kind of collective bargaining agreement or guild agreements, union stuff that arise. So you're focusing on those things, but those things lay the foundation for each of your, for example, TV shows or your movies. I don't know, different podcasts, like whatever you're kind of doing, there's probably a collective bargaining agreement, I think, behind it. And so your focus is on those and, ensuring that your client is following those basic terms, basic conditions. So it's really fascinating because if, something comes on my desk, you know, I want to make sure it's looking good in terms of it perhaps being a SAG-AFTRA signatory. So SAG is one of the unions I used to work for. It's the actors union. A lot of people associate it with the SAG Awards. But you want to make sure your production is probably SAG signatory, because if it's not, you're not going to really have the access to SAG members or SAG actors. And so you kind of go down this path of making sure everything you're doing is union blessed. And so your production doesn't have any issues with it, because if it has issues with it, maybe you can't have that episode after all. Maybe you can't do that. Maybe you can't get this talent. Maybe you can't do this. And so it really kind of lays out this like baseline of like where to go, what to do. And we kind of just help in labor, help guide people through that process. So it's really fun. And it really is you looking into the entertainment space and just kind of this different lens, like putting a labor hat on, but doing it in the space of movies and the industry. So it seems to be more and more relevant with different parts of it, like gaming, Ramela had mentioned, like different things coming up that different players are attached to, but at the end of the day, they still have to follow California law, right? So you still have to go through the labor codes, whether it's labor or employment, whatever it may be, you still got to kind of do the right thing, you know, by law itself. So I do think it lays the backbone. So it's exciting to be in it. Yeah.
Thanks for that overview. I know our panel is very transactional heavy. I know there's a lot of entertainment litigation out there, unfortunately not represented here. Probably my prior background, but not for many years. But I wanted to focus on the art of the entertainment deal, which John kind of touched on before, because it comes in so many forms: talent agreements, rights acquisitions, production services, distribution deals, and I know so much more. Wanted to throw this to the panel if there are any big picture issues that are important to stay mindful of, regardless of the deal or deal structure. And we can start with John, since he was the one that first set the groundwork for us.
Sure. To me, it's incredibly important to know the objective a particular project is trying to accomplish, like figuring out the North Star. So we are a very different type of a network. You know, we're more of a platform, and so so much of entertainment legal work is weighing risk, and we're obviously trained to weigh the legal risk, and so you have to counterbalance that with what the creative benefit is, or what the company benefit is, and what's the core objective that you're trying to accomplish, so that you can properly sort of advise your clients. So for us, you know, if we're doing a project to highlight a platform or a product feature that we're trying to launch, then a lot of the traditional legal or deal terms are going to play sort of, you know, are going to be pushed to the back burner. We're not going to care as much. So for instance, we launched a live shopping tab on our Instagram, and where you can be a big name celebrity. You know, this week we did a Hailey Bieber activation where you're selling product on your Instagram, and there's some show feature. We did a whole holiday live shopping activation. And so there's a live component and there's a shopping component. And so in a week's time or in a couple of days' time, all that content's going to be irrelevant. And so you're not going to hold on to as much of the rights or care as much about the rights or the tail end of the license and those types of things and exclusivity for a long period of time. And so again, your objective is to bring people to a live activation, or we're launching a new product feature. Again, you're trying to bring people out to an initial press release, get them excited about a new product feature. And again, so you're trying to learn what the company objective is here. And then in other cases, you know, we do a lot of talk shows, and we hit upon a lot of, you know, big newsy and buzzy stories. And so to tell those stories, sometimes you got to flirt a little bit with dicey topics that may venture into sort of defamation or those types of things. And so you don't want to lose the story. You want the viewer to have some form of a payoff, while at the same time protecting the company's interests. But you may be a little more lenient because you know that this is such an important story to tell, and such a sort of important moment for the show. And so again, if you can properly understand what you're trying to accomplish with this particular material, then you can properly weigh it. And I think that that's sort of the big sort of underlying issue that you got to keep in mind in any structuring of an entertainment deal or managing any of the risk.
Ramela, did you have anything else to add on that?
Yeah, so I think that was all like super important. From my angle of it would be, so we do a lot of agreements like the types that you mentioned, Vardy, and I think it's helpful to kind of take a step back. So for example, if I'm doing a talent agreement or a writer agreement or a director agreement, it kind of helps, or production services agreement, it helps to take a step back and see, like, in the overall scheme of the project, where does my agreement lie? And how meaningful is my agreement? Look, every piece of a project is meaningful for sure. But for example, you know, you sometimes hear people in interviews, creatives or studios in interviews saying, when we created this movie, we knew we wanted that actor, like it had to be him. Like we created the movie around him, or things like that. And so that's really important, I think, to take into account on the agreements you're working on. So if I'm doing a music license, for example, we do a lot of those. Maybe the song that I'm trying to get would be nice to have, but not like, you know, like deal breaker. Or maybe it's a song that it's like the climax of the movie and there's a whole scene around it, and maybe we really need to have that. If it's a cast member, maybe we really want this talent and the role was written for that specific person. So I think it's really easy to get caught up in the really nitty-gritty like legal drafting, which is obviously really important. But I think taking a step back, and for me, speaking with my clients and, you know, figuring out, where does this lie for you? How meaningful is it? How far can we take this? Do we really need to close? And that's the most important thing. Or do you have multiple options and would be nice to get this, but we can turn to something else? And I think a second part in terms of big picture is, I talk to a lot of people where, and I get it, like, and including myself, maybe you want to be only a certain type of lawyer. Maybe you want to be only a film lawyer. I still think it's important to understand, not necessarily have to do, like spend time doing something you don't want to do, but understand and have insight into other deals. How does a television deal work? What does the back end look like for a television deal? I think it's important to know that for your film deals. Like obviously the back end would be different, but I mean, if there's areas of the law that you are not interested in practicing in, completely makes sense, and of course very reasonable. But I do think we should be open to understanding them a little bit and having a, like, touching the tip of that project or that concept, because it'll help us bring a different perspective into what we are interested in doing and have that different take on it. So for me, those would be the two big picture items to take a step back and look into.
And I imagine that leads nicely to what probably Talin thinks is very important in the art of the entertainment deal, but I'll let you speak for yourself.
Oh yeah, and I, you know, and from my point of view, it'd be like, you know, let's say you're getting into a talent deal or whatever you're doing, I would want to make sure the company's interests are looking good, right? Are we good with SAG? Are we good with WGA? But also, are we good with our own interests? Are we defending our own interests in this deal? So it's, you get so many flavors in one thing kind of thing, you know, you get so many people to look at something and have different things going on in it. So very transaction heavy, but very also creative heavy, because a lot of the time, as Ramela said, you have to think big picture and like think of it in that way instead of being so focused perhaps on the drafting of it. So you get to think with your businessy creative mind more too, which is really fun to do.
Yeah, and I think expanding on both of what you were saying is, like, in light of the big picture, is remembering like how different pieces impact your project, and that you may not be a labor lawyer, or you may not be a privacy lawyer, or you may not be a TV lawyer, but like all of these may come to impact your deal one way or another, whether like there are downstream rights or there's like a slight shift in the agreement that actually is a massive change from a legal perspective for your colleagues. So having a little bit of understanding in this space, as not necessarily being an expert, is so helpful for being, I think, a successful, having a successful deal and just being a successful lawyer in this space. Shifting gears a little bit, wanting to talk about a topic near and dear to my heart, which is the impact of emerging technologies on the entertainment industry and the practice of entertainment law generally. the world, or at least my world currently, is abuzz with talk of the metaverse, augmented reality, virtual reality, and NFTs. How are you seeing this impact your practices? And I'll start with John, since he's squarely within this space with me.
Yeah. So yeah, all these are like, you know, the buzzwords everyone's talking about: metaverse and NFTs and, you know, blockchain and all this stuff. Like nobody knows what anything is and what it all means. And so we're all just sort of figuring it out together. You know, I think it's so easy that, you know, if you look at the boilerplate language on any talent deal or production deal, you probably have language that covers you know, has the right, you know, broad rights, and it says new exploitation methods and new this, new future tech or whatever, and it kind of probably covers it, maybe. But whether it'll hold up, who knows? But what we are seeing the impact having is to specifically call out the rights that we otherwise are probably covered with, to ensure that we're having a good partner experience, that there's no surprises on exactly what we are engaging them for and what we are trying to create. Because when you try to explain the metaverse, it just sounds like, you know, just a digital space and all that stuff. But there's very little sort of education on exactly what it is. And so in our negotiations, we're sort of going the opposite way. Instead of being broad, we're actually being very, very specific, so that they understand exactly what we're trying to engage them for. And so, for instance, we did a very big concert with the Foo Fighters that tied into our Super Bowl commercial this past year. And as part of that, we had a traditional 2D version that you could watch on your Instagram or Facebook. But we also had a VR version that lived in our VR platform. And so in that negotiating, we needed two separate deliverable assets, one a VR sort of 180 immersive version, and the other a traditional 2D. But we had to make sure that our talent understood exactly where things are going to live, what it's going to look like, what a end user is going to be able to do, the fact that we're going to take their, you know, image and put it in a digital marquee in a digital theater, that the digital user is going to be able to take a digital selfie. You know, these are things that, again, may be covered under broad language, but we want to make sure that we're getting the partner comfortable with. And so for us, you know, we're seeing an expansion of the different rights and things that we're going to want to do in the metaverse. You know, things like NFTs are coming up, which are for those non-fungible tokens. It feels like a JPEG, but it's not. It lives on the blockchain. It's something we can talk about later. But things like digital merchandise, that's starting to make its way through, where you can sell digital goods in sort of a metaverse environment. And so talent is becoming more and more savvy as to holding on to those rights. On our platform, very specifically, we have a product called Horizon Worlds, where you can create a world within the metaverse. And a lot of our shows are sort of having that component and be a piece of it. And so again, we want to make sure that this isn't just photo and likeness rights that you would otherwise see in any deal. We want to make sure that they're photo and likeness rights within a digital world and environment. And again, making sure that we're making our partner very clear, being clear with them, and ensuring that they're comfortable to see their photo and likeness show up in a sort of a metaverse, weird digital world environment. And so we are becoming much more specific with our negotiations, instead of relying on traditional sort of broad language that this can live anywhere, that we own it and it's our right to do whatever we want with it. We're taking sort of a different tact with it. So it's having a real impact in how we approach each project.
How about for you, Ramela? How are you seeing it impact your practice?
Yeah, it definitely is. So I do a lot of rights deals, which means that, so either it's a rights acquisition or an option purchase agreement, which means that I help my clients acquire the rights in a book or a screenplay or whatever the underlying property is, in order to make a project or production based on that underlying property. So in the past, when I would do these deals like 6 years ago or something, you know, it'd be pretty straight, you know, as straightforward as it, you know, as straightforward as an entertainment deal could be, right? Like if it's a book, for example, we would say, okay, we have you know, my client would have the right to make a film or a TV show based on your book, and you get to continue, you know, writing and publishing your book and doing sequels. Maybe we throw in merchandising because that's always really important. So like if you had like a pie, it was like just those 4 pieces of the pie, right? Now it's like, okay, but who gets podcast rights? Who gets video game rights? Who gets NFT rights if those are applicable? Now that same pie is split in like 12 plus different ways, and it keeps getting bigger. So it has impacted us. It is coming up, and I think it makes these deals even more interesting because it is something to think about. You may, like John said, there's always language, or there should be language about new exploitation methods, but it's kind of like language you put in there, but when it actually comes up, like the parties will discuss, like, what do we really mean, and does this fall into that? And whereas before it's like, no, we're gonna make a TV show and like that's what we need. But in 10 years, maybe you want something different. Do you have those rights? Did you think to get those rights? And maybe you did, or maybe you didn't, or maybe it's something like the metaverse where back then it wasn't even talked about or so much of a thing. And now you don't have those rights, and now you got to go back to the negotiating table, and it's never fun to like claw back up, you know, and try to get something you didn't have. So it is impacting our deals, and it's really interesting. I love it because it just brings a new different spin on it. And I'm like interested to see where it goes and how that pie does get split up, because there's good arguments for both sides. Podcasts based on a book, I mean, that could go either way, right? So it's always an interesting discussion for sure.
And similarly in this space, I find that the law is often lagging behind the technology. So are you, and this is for everyone on the panel here, are there any areas of the law that you feel have minimal guidance right now, and the legal industry and you guys are struggling as everyone's kind of figuring it out as they go along? Can start with John.
Yeah, to me, there's probably, I mean, the one area that stood out to me is probably blockchain technology and ownership. It hasn't really impacted us yet, but I'm sure it will. So the example of this that came out recently is this whole Seth Green thing. I don't know if anybody saw that. Seth Green went out and bought a Bored Ape NFT. These are those NFTs that you know, they're like top shelf, like $200,000. So he buys this Bored Ape. I think he bought it for $300,000. And he was going to develop a TV show around that Bored Ape. It's like a cartoon, right? Character. But then it got stolen from him through a scam or some hack or some other nefarious way. And so he was no longer able to do the TV show because he lost ownership. And that's a strange thing, that you can actually lose IP ownership from a wallet address. And that's something very strange and odd. He eventually got it back. He bought it from somebody who bought it unknowingly, you know, through legitimate means. But I just think that is moving into a weird IP ownership question of exactly where IP ownership attaches to, and the fact that it can now be moved through just like computer code to different people. And so I think that's something that it's going to have to be regulated somehow or traceable somehow. And certainly for us, you know, in a metaverse environment, you know, who owns what? Does the platform own it? Does the creator own it? Can the creator take something from one metaverse and put it into another metaverse? And so these ideas of ownership and the fact that blockchain technology really tries to wrest ownership into the individual user, I think those are questions that haven't been figured out. And I don't know if there's going to be law or there's just going to be sort of best practices eventually to figure out exactly how that all works.
Ramela, how about you? Any thoughts on this?
There's been a lot of analysis over rights, like grant of rights provisions, which anytime you're doing a deal, I mean, I would definitely say that's like the most important provision. What exactly are you getting? What are you giving up? But in kind of what I mean is like force majeure, right? Before the pandemic, I think that was the standard provision you put in your contracts. Now it's like the analysis over force majeure is huge, as it should be, because it actually happened. And what did it mean? And who was suspended? Who was paid? And I'm seeing that with rights provisions as well, as important as they always are. There's certain language you typically see in any and all media, now or hereafter devised. That is like boilerplate standard language. but what does it actually mean? Now we're here after devise. Okay, so is that the metaverse? Because that kind of came later. Like, is that what we meant? Did we have a meeting of the minds that back then, 10 years ago, that that's what we meant and now it's okay? It's not so much that, hey, we have a signed agreement, so we have the rights, we're good to go. It's like, yeah, but what did we mean? What did both parties mean? And it matters. You don't want, I mean, like, it depends how confident you are, I guess, but like nobody really wants a dispute. You want to make sure, you know, it's a very talent friendly industry. We want to make sure we're all working together, like creative studios, like it's, you know, everybody cares about the relationship and making sure everyone's happy. So it's really important to really be deep in that analysis. And when you're drafting, to mean what you say. Like, yes, we have that new exploitation methods. Yes, we have that language in the grant of rights, but the more specific you are, the less cause for argument or dispute later. Because it's always better to hash that out in the beginning. And most parties want to hash that out in the beginning and figure it out and continue to have like a really good working relationship. So I feel like the more specific and detailed you are, to the extent you can be, of course, always helps out. And we are seeing a lot of analysis over it, which again, it's part of the fun. It's kind of, it is cool to look at something and think like, does it apply and does it not apply? And if, you know, if you're on the side that's saying it applies, why? And what do you think you guys meant years ago? You know, and always making sure that talent relationship stays intact and everybody's working together, because that's really important in this industry. Like, I've seen it firsthand, and people really do care about that, as we should. You know, the whole point is to make a really cool project and get that to the audience, right? Most of the time, like, or if it's like a campaign or activation, but the point usually is to get it to the public and to make something that they love. And people always want to work together to do that. So I do think it's really important.
And Talin, I wanted to give you some opportunity here to add if there's anything from like the labor relations side.
I mean, well, a lot of these things, right, there is minimal guidance because it's coming up and we're all trying to figure it out together, but it eventually catches up, and then then you have to deal with it in your deals, because what happens 5 years from now, right? And so, for example, however many years ago when Netflix, like none of these streaming things were existing, we didn't account for them, but now they exist. So at the bargaining table, at the negotiating table, we have to think about it. How do we deal with streaming and perhaps a topic like residuals to the talent or something like that? So all of these things kind of catch up with one another, and you really got to do your best to see what you can do now to avoid an issue when you have to go back to the table and negotiate. So.
No, it makes sense. I think all the emerging technology is going to have impacts on all of our careers and work in ways that we probably haven't even seen yet or realized, at least. So do you have any advice to practitioners on how to best tackle or familiarize themselves with this changing technological landscape? And Ramela, let's start with you.
My advice, and it's the advice to myself, is to actually immerse yourself in it. So I think when we talk about the metaverse, when we talk about virtual reality, augmented reality, you know, I'm not saying go out and buy a headset, but, you know, maybe borrow a headset from someone, go on YouTube, see, you know, people post videos of what it's like. And I think the best way to negotiate something or to deal with something is to fully, like, really understand it. And that sounds like so simple and so obvious, but like, for example, if you're talking about avatars, do you know what an avatar is? If you're negotiating, you know, like, do you know how to create one? Do you know what it ends up looking like? NFTs, so much talk about NFTs. Do you know what that looks like or what that means? So my best advice, and it's to myself too, is to learn it yourself. And because I feel like you can only, yes, you can touch base with your clients, of course, and, you know, they'll explain it to you or somebody else will, of course. But I think you can really only negotiate something if you truly get it yourself. So if I'm negotiating about like an esports thing, I actually like, it's like cheesy, but like I do go and like check out the esport to make sure I'm understanding when I'm saying like, oh, you can't do this in there, or you can, or we have this exclusivity, like what do I actually mean? And what does that look like in practice? And I feel like I can only do that if I'm doing it myself, to the extent that I can. So that would be my advice for sure. Like, go create an avatar. What does it look like? What would yours look like? I don't know, but you know, try to figure that out by doing it yourself is my best advice.
Although I think our company would be really happy if people went out and bought those headsets.
That was the plug. Yeah.
Little plug there.
Yeah.
John, do you have any other advice to add?
I mean, I was going to say exactly that. Go get a headset, and you should probably get a Quest headset. They're the best. But yeah, I couldn't agree more that, you know, so often the roadblock that we face is that the attorney on the other side has no idea what we're talking about. And so we're either running circles around them, or they think they're negotiating for one thing, but we're actually talking about something different. So, you know, it works on both sides. If you want to be in this space and want to make sure that you're not left behind, you do definitely need to use the products, check out the platforms, immerse yourself, make sure you understand. And, you know, I would say the low hanging fruit, and we'll get into this later in terms of career, is, you know, right now there are so many limited VR metaverse companies that, you know, you can make easy money if you start your own company, or there's probably a lot of room to start a career in this world in those types of companies, because it's so new, and everybody's just figuring it out. So I would say you would do yourself a huge favor if you have a really strong grasp on exactly what these emerging platforms and technologies are.
And Talin, did you have anything else to add?
I mean, no, I mean, you just get in there, learn it, get in there, immerse yourself, be uncomfortable with it, figure it out. Because once you know it, you can represent whatever you need to represent.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to like literally Google what is an NFT, right? Like, I think there's just so much information out there, and it'd be great. So shifting gears a little bit, I wanted to talk about the legal practice and how like career advice for students and young attorneys. And so first I want to start off with the question to the panel, if they had any specific career advice for, as I mentioned, the law students or young attorneys who want to enter into this space. So why don't we start with Talin?
Oh man, like this is the golden question, right? And everybody's waiting for like the golden answer. But I think I can only speak for myself. Like I just do it. Get in there. Go network. I mean, as a law student went to so many networking things where I just stood there by myself, but who cares? Do it. Talk to people. I think it's really helpful to get yourself out there, build these relationships, because man, that really matters here, at least in my world, I think. It really, really matters. And just ask questions. And I mean, I would go by myself to like bar association events. I would sit there and I would make a deal with myself. I need to talk to one person. That's it. And so just do it. I really encourage people to just get out there and just do it. I don't plug Nike, but just do it.
How about you, Ramela?
There's gonna be like ads like on the side of this page any minute. I would say, so I've interviewed, I like interview candidates, and I think there's a big difference between somebody who comes to me and says, you know, it's a really hard industry, right? For sure, to break into. There's a difference between someone who said like, I was not able to get an entertainment internship, did not happen for me, and I don't know any entertainment lawyers, no one in my family, networking, like, but I'm really interested in entertainment law. So there's that candidate. And then I could have another candidate who, same thing, no entertainment internship, no, they don't know anyone, but they're like, oh, I read the Hollywood Reporter like every Sunday night. I have bought books, right? Borrow books from the library. I check out books from the library about entertainment law, about option purchase agreements. I'm a consumer of content, but I also look up articles as to like how the show is made. Like, oh, those are all things I feel like you can do yourself, like at home or whatever. So I feel like there's a difference between someone says who I want to do it, and I couldn't break into it. It's so hard, which it is. And like, I couldn't do it. I couldn't break into it. I had to take all these other non-entertainment internships, but look how much I actually loved it. I checked out these books. I read about it. I personally think if you're interested in entertainment law, and I wish I did this sooner, like Variety, Deadline, Hollywood Reporter, like every Sunday night, I would spend 10 minutes reading those. Now I'm on Instagram every day, another plugin, Variety, but I follow them on Instagram. So every time I open Instagram, they're literally like, the algorithm is like, my first thing is like Variety and what was posted that day. So it's just an easy way of like, what was up to date? Like you can be really, there's so much information out there about the industry, which is great. Like you could be really in the know without actually doing it now, right? Like you can learn about the latest trends and what's going on, how the industry shifted from box office bonuses to streaming advances. So to me, there's a big difference between those two types of candidates of like, I couldn't get into it, it's really tough, but look what I did on my own to show you that I'm really interested in what I could learn by myself. That'd be my take on it.
And John, how about you?
I mean, those are great answers. I mean, I would keep plugging internships as much as you can. Find small companies that may be willing to take on somebody a little less experienced. But to Ramela's point, I think you're just trying to show that you're passionate about this industry, that you actually want to, you know, be part of this industry, that you're not just looking for a job. So whatever you're going to do to get that person comfortable that you're interested in this industry and that you're conversational about the things that are happening in this industry, those are going to be sort of the easy things that you can do sort of out the gate.
And we got 2 questions that were on this, so I'm going to take them earlier than our Q&A spot. So one I think is a little easier for me to answer, so I'm going to do that quickly first, which was how someone would get into an entertainment law and merge their interest in music creation or as a music critic. One thing I'll tell you is like every entertainment company and even non-entertainment companies like Peloton have a music department. Like the music legal space is actually like a smaller space and they all kind of know each other, but there is music law, right? Like, and there's like business affairs related to that. So you can actually merge your love of like music with that space. And if you're so interested, so learn the IP issues there and the deals, that piece, and like try to find people, have coffees with them. And then I don't know if anybody else has anything on that point before I jump to the next question. Yeah, go for it.
I can. Why? Because collective bargaining agreements regarding sound recordings, regarding music. So music is such a small community, but there, again, informative coffees are really great, but there's a lot you can do in that space. And all these companies have, as Bardi mentioned, have music departments. So find your niche. So for example, I learned a lot about it through labor, but converse with like Disney music all the time. And so you can find different ways to maybe tap into it. But I just wanted to mention that because all these things can intertwine with themselves. So.
Absolutely. I remember having to deal with our music legal when we had to talk about, when I was at Disney, when talking about putting like a song in an Elsa doll, right? Like there's music everywhere. And even now, like whenever we do anything on like for Facebook or the, Instagram, there's usually music behind every production. So people to know about. The other question was actually like my career path. So I wanted to hit this, and someone asked about any advice for a new attorney interested in going into entertainment law, but with who has predominant experience in civil litigation. So I was a general civil litigator when I started. I started when the economy tanked back in 2010. So pretty much was like litigation or bust a little bit, like for me when I was graduating. I know some people made it out to transactional world, but I didn't practice predominantly entertainment, but kind of thinking about what we spoke about in the beginning of this is there's so many different pieces of entertainment law, right? Like it's about a little bit about spin. Frankly, contract is a contract, IP issues are IP issues, and like they can be applicable in different pieces. Like you may be working on acquisitions of other things, you're doing like a lease of you litigated how a contract term is negotiated or interpreted, whether there was a breach. All those come into play when then you're doing like drafting of agreements. And so part of it is remembering that like the art of the spin and like figuring it out, like what pieces of your career are relevant and translatable, and combining that with Ramela's advice of like, get your interest in there and then kind of talking to people, so I jumped from general civil litigation with like, I had a lot of IP background into Disney supporting marketing teams for consumer products. So it was in the entertainment space. It wasn't in the film side of the house, but there are a lot of like ways to go about this. I don't know if anybody else wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I would love to, because I feel like sometimes I get people reaching out to me who are like anxious or worried, like I've only done this type of law, like I'm never going to be in entertainment. But oh my God, I think it's so valuable. Like, you would have a different perspective. Like I had a labor lawyer reach out to me who said, I want to be in entertainment, but I'm only like strictly labor, not even like labor and entertainment crossover. Like I'm just labor and I want to be in entertainment. And I'm like, that's like amazing, because like I'm an entertainment lawyer, but it would be really, if you have a labor background or a civil background, you would be able to spot issues in entertainment contracts, probably of like from your prior experience, and be able to issue spot and like get that taken care of in the entertainment contract. It's like goes back to what we were talking about before. You may not have to know all the types of law, but the more you can identify issues, the better, because it protects your client in the space you are in. So I think it's awesome if somebody has different experience, because you could bring a totally new take on stuff. I went the straightforward path, entertainment law, like that's what I always wanted, and I was lucky enough to get it. But that's certainly not the only way. And I think having that different perspective and different experience is so valuable. And I definitely don't think it's like a hindrance or something. I think it's a great add-on.
We have another question in this realm of like advice for law students. And the question was, quoting verbatim, "Our studio is snooty about which law school you went to." I don't know if Talin or John or who wants to go first on this one, and then I'm happy to chime in at the end.
I mean, I'm sure there's
Go
some
ahead.
that are, it's probably more specific to the attorney that's hiring, that they have some chip on their shoulder, that they only want to hire the way they got hired kind of thing, and caliber of attorneys. But look, I've hired, we've hired like 4 or 5 attorneys on our team. I don't think I know anyone's law school on my team. Like not to be like I don't know anything about it. Like I could care less about their law school. That's me personally. I could care less about their grades. I could care less about whether they went to a firm or not. To me, going to our prior point, do they know the issues? So if I say the word lock, do you know what a lock is? Do you know what an option is? Do you know what an exclusivity provision is? And there are terms of art. So I have to get to a point where I'm comfortable that, you're interested, you're vested into this, you're conversational about what's happening in our industry, you're dedicated, you're committed. And so those to me are much more important. I know for sure, well, certainly, back in the day, I never went to a law firm, and the door was closed on a lot of jobs for me at certain studios because they required, law firm experience, and usually, that trickles down to what kind of law school you went to. So that's probably still the case, but I see that going away quickly with sort of the next generation of hiring attorneys not caring as much. But that's my perspective.
I don't know if Talin, you have more to add, or
I mean, yeah, I guess I'm at a studio, but I'm looking at my interns' resumes and I don't know where anybody, like, I don't care. Like, people are putting their grade and I'm like, I don't even know what that means. Like, because I can't tell you how important it is what Ramela said. Like 10 years ago, somebody talked to me about variety, and the second she did, I downloaded it on my phone and I get notifications. Like, it's, what do you care about? Like, and maybe it is a generational thing, as John is also saying. Like, I care more about you. Am I going to be able to work with you? Will you be able to represent me and my team well? It's going to be, I mean, that's just also me. So, but I think also every attorney is different.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think there has been a generational shift. I know historically in places I've worked, it has mattered. It has mattered not in that it was necessarily a bar, but it has unfortunately mattered in the comp people got when they were coming in, the level they were titled at coming in. So like I have seen that in practice, unfortunately, But that said, I think people can overcome them in other ways, right? Like of showing the determination, like the love for the field, and really understanding the space and like spinning yourself as having the right experience, regardless of like what that piece is. So it does, like, I think it helps open certain doors, but it's not like it doesn't block people. And I think it is shifting because people have realized that it has impacted diversity numbers, generally speaking, including holding back like Armenians in the field. I know we didn't get a time and we're at time now, so to speak about that, because we are anomalies in this field. There aren't a lot of us. Like John and I are the 2 Armenian lawyers at Meta. I think Talin's the only one at Disney, So it is, I think people are realizing that they're losing on talent, putting that as a bar. So I don't know if anyone has any additional words. I don't want to go too far over, but maybe a couple of minutes, or we can take maybe one more question from the group. But let's see. I don't know if John, Ramela, or Talin, you wanted to add anything else, or I think there's one question we can hit here where, let's see. We got a really great one about streaming, and then we'll do this and then end it for the day, I think, which was streaming has undeniably shifted the world of entertainment. And so what are some of the challenges and benefits streaming has had in each of your individual positions, and how do you try to overcome them? Not sure who wants to take this first, but maybe Ramela?
I think it's a great question. Streaming is definitely in the game. I personally love it. I think it's provided really quick access to people to consume content, obviously, which I think is what is at the core of every entertainment lawyer. We love, we love what we do. We love content. We're consumers of content. I think there's things to take into account when you're doing a deal, when it's a streamer and when it's a non-streamer. Like, how does the compensation work? How does the back end work? How do bonuses work, if any? How do credits work? I do think it comes up, and you have to look at the deal in a different lens. And it goes back to like what applies here, what doesn't, what makes sense here and what doesn't. You know, sometimes people want something and it's like that future like literally is not in here. Like it's not that we don't want to give it to you, it's like it just does not apply here, you know? So I do think it impacts our positions. And like with anything else we talked about, I think it all goes down to if you love what you're doing and you're passionate about it, which we all are, and I think anyone who wants to be in the space is, it's just another area to learn and to figure out together, and to make sure the parties are happy and comfortable working together on it. So I am a fan of streaming, and for non-streaming, for both. I think anything that's getting content to people, you know, is always a good thing in my eyes.
Talin or John, I don't know if you had anything to add. Otherwise, we can go ahead, John.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say for us, like, you know, again, we're very, very much different. So if you go to like Cardi B's page, or if you go to Simone Biles' page, you'll see that they post the episodes that we do with them. And so for us, it's like the talent is kind of the streaming network. And so that's a very different sort of twist to everything, where we do obviously have a video platform, but more recently, we've done somewhat talent distribution agreements where we're leveraging their following and their brand to sort of help us distribute the content. So that's very unique to us. We'll probably see more of that. And I would guess that some of the other streamers may try to find ways to get their talent more involved in the distribution of the content as they're looking to sort of you know, stand above the noise. And so that's probably something that you're going to see more of, and you got to figure out exactly how to go about doing it.
And Talin, did you have any last words to add on this piece?
I was just like laughing really quickly earlier because I mean, streaming is everywhere. And so whether it's a challenge or not, I think it's what is present day, and you have to learn it. And I mean, I'm in a place where I have something like Disney Plus, but also Hulu, and like just different things going on. And so it's been very fun to keep up if you are also somebody that likes it. And so you get to see it happen, and then like you go home at night, turn on your whatever platform, and you're like, oh, you know, there's my work kind of thing. Like so it's very fascinating, and I think it's just the beginning of, you know, truly just emerging technologies in this space, really.
Well, I want to thank our amazing panelists for a great session. At the risk of being a broken record and spamming everyone, but please remember to please take our survey that we sent out in the link, and I think will be emailed to you after too. Really helps us. And if I also just a plug to, you know, follow the Armenian Bar Association on LinkedIn and Facebook, and I think we're on Instagram too. But we're everywhere. But thank you so much, everyone, for your time. And sorry we couldn't get to all the questions. But this will also be available for recorded for anybody else on our YouTube channel shortly. So feel free to send friends to this. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.